She started her run with the same confidence she brought to every morning in the Makawao Forest Reserve. The light was thin and cool, dripping through branches that hung heavy with overnight moisture. Birds called from somewhere deep in the canopy, and the trail carried the soft smell of wet dirt and eucalyptus. Amanda Eller moved easily, planning no more than a short workout before heading to a class she was teaching later that day. She chose a familiar path, then, on instinct, more than intention, stepped onto a side trail she didn't normally take. It looked harmless, just a gentle curve into the trees. But minutes later, when she tried to return to the main route, nothing matched her memory. She turned around expecting to see the trail behind her. Instead, she saw identical ridges, identical clusters of ferns, and no visible sign of the direction she had come from. She walked farther, trying to catch a landmark, but the forest folded in around her in every direction. The moment she realized she wasn't simply turned around, but truly lost hit, fast and hard. She spoke aloud to steady herself, forcing slow breaths as she scanned the ground for prints she might have left earlier. But the damp soil had already shifted, smoothing over anything recognizable. Her phone was in her car. She hadn't brought it, because the run was supposed to be quick. With no tools, no map, and no reliable memory of her last turn, she pushed through brush, looking for higher ground. The silence tightened. Her calls for help hit layers of thick vegetation and died before traveling far. She began to move with purpose, hoping the main trail was just beyond the next bend. But each bend became another, and the pressure of the forest closed in until she had to accept she wasn't getting out before dark. That first night shook her. The ground was cold and uneven, forcing her to curl awkwardly between roots while insects crawled across her legs. Every sound in the dark felt amplified, branches settling, leaves brushing, water dripping. She barely slept, listening to the forest as if it were waiting for her to make one wrong move. In the morning, she followed the sound of a stream, reasoning that water would mean life, direction, and at least one constant in a landscape she no longer understood. Search teams were already looking for her back on the trail. Her car still sat in the parking lot where she had left it. As hours passed with no sign of her, they expanded their search, calling her name as they moved through ravines, ridges, and overgrown paths. At times they came close, but sound didn't travel normally. Helicopters passed overhead on day 2, and she heard one sweep across the sky. She climbed onto a large root system, waving her arms, but the canopy completely swallowed her. The forest became more unforgiving on day 3. She attempted to climb a steep slope to gain elevation, but the mud beneath her feet broke loose. She slid downward, hitting a rock that twisted her right ankle sharply. The pain was immediate and deep, a kind she recognized as more than a sprain. She wrapped the ankle with torn fabric, tightening it until the throbbing dulled enough for her to stand. The injury slowed her, but stopping meant stiffening, and stiffening meant the end of any chance she had. She forced herself to keep moving. Her psychological state began to shift as hunger and dehydration built. She found berries she knew were safe, but not enough to feel full. Her body weakened, making every incline feel steeper, every step heavier. She talked to herself constantly, sometimes to stay calm, sometimes just to hear another voice. She also began to feel moments of panic that came without warning, surges of fear that made her heart pound so hard she had to stop and crouch until it settled. The jungle played tricks on her sense of direction. Sunlight came in patches, leaving whole stretches in dim shadow. Storms rolled through without warning, drenching her clothes and chilling her at night. She slept in short, shivering bursts, waking whenever something rustled too close. She imagined, more than once, that she heard footsteps or voices. She would sit up fast, listening, only for the sounds to vanish into the endless hum of the forest. Midway through her ordeal, she fell into a deep ravine she thought was shallow enough to cross. The drop knocked her breath away and left her bruised along her side, with a deep gouge across her left shin, where a branch tore the skin open. She cleaned the wound in stream water, watching dirt swirl away in the current. But she knew infection was a real possibility. The cut darkened in the following days, turning angry shades of purple and red. She limped, dragged, and crawled her way along the water's edge because climbing was nearly impossible. She drank constantly, trying to manage dehydration, but staying hydrated came at a price. Streams were often icy cold, and washing herself left her shaking uncontrollably in the evenings. She talked to the trees, to the sky, to the water, as she tried to hold on to her sense of reality. Periods of exhaustion blurred her thoughts. She sometimes believed time had stopped entirely. On 2 occasions, she saw brief flashes of light through the trees and thought they were searchers. When she tried to reach them, the terrain curved away, leading her deeper into unfamiliar territory. By day 15, her body was covered in cuts, bruises, and bug bites. Her hip ached from repeated falls. Her injured ankle had begun to swell again, making each step feel like bone grinding on bone. She ran her hands over her ribs and could feel them more sharply than before. Her face was sunburned, her lips cracked, and her voice had grown raspy from days of calling out with no response. She began to conserve energy, not just for survival, but because raising her voice physically hurt. On day 17, weakened but still moving, she followed the sound of a waterfall. She believed, without any certainty, that if she could reach open space, someone might finally spot her. She dragged herself over slick rocks and collapsed near the water. That was the moment a helicopter crew noticed something pale moving near the base of the falls. They circled back, and a rescuer leaned out. Amanda lifted her arm, the motion slow and barely controlled, but enough to be seen. Rescuers reached her minutes later. She was dehydrated, injured, disoriented, and barely able to stand, but alive. They strapped her into a stretcher, and she cried quietly as they lifted her from the jungle that had nearly swallowed her. She had endured 17 days of injuries, hunger, fear, isolation, and the constant fight to stay conscious and hopeful. She survived because she refused to give up, choosing to keep moving even when the forest seemed determined to stop her at every turn. Thank you for listening to Horrifying Survival Stories. Subscribe for more stories of those who faced the impossible and lived